For over 100 years, Japan was a land torn apart. Imagine a century of constant warfare, where powerful warlords, known as daimyō, battled for every inch of territory. This was the Sengoku Jidai, the age of warring states, an era defined by chaos, betrayal, and bloodshed. The dream of a unified Japan seemed impossible. But from this crucible of conflict, one man would rise to finally bring peace. His name was Tokugawa Ieyasu, and his story is one of incredible patience, cunning strategy, and ruthless ambition. He wasn't just a warrior. He was a master political player who would end a century of war and establish a dynasty that would rule Japan for over 250 years. How did he do it? How did a man who started life as a political pawn become the most powerful figure in the nation? Today, we re-diving into the life of the shogun, who ended the age of the samurai and forged a new Japan. Tokugawa Ieyasu was born in 1543, not into power, but into peril. His early life was a lesson in survival. As a young boy, he was sent away as a hostage, a political bargaining chip passed between powerful clans. First, he was a hostage of the Oda clan, then the Imagawa clan. While other boys were learning to ride and fight freely, Ieyasu was learning the harsh realities of power politics from the inside. He observed the strengths and weaknesses of his captors, learning that true power wasn't just about military might, but about patience and timing. These years as a hostage forged his character. He developed a legendary patience, a quality that would become his greatest weapon. He learned to wait, to watch, and to strike only when the moment was perfect. While other, more impulsive warlords, like Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi, burned brightly and quickly, Ieyasu played the long game. After the death of his captor, Imagawa Yoshimoto, Ieyasu was finally free. He returned to his home province and began the slow, methodical process of building his own power base. He formed a crucial alliance with the rising star, Oda Nobunaga, a brilliant but brutal unifier. Ieyasu served Nobunaga faithfully, expanding his own domains while helping Nobunaga's campaign to bring Japan under a single sword. When Nobunaga was betrayed and forced to commit seppuku in 1582, Japan was thrown back into chaos. It was Nobunaga's top general, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who quickly seized control, completing the unification that Nobunaga had started. Ieyasu, ever the pragmatist, initially opposed Hideyoshi, but eventually submitted, recognizing his overwhelming power. He bided his time, serving as Hideyoshi's most powerful vassal, but never losing sight of his own ambitions. Hideyoshi, wary of Ieyoshi's growing influence, moved him to the remote Kanto region in the east, centered on a small fishing village called Edo. This was meant to be a strategic disadvantage, moving Ieyasu away from the political center of Kyoto. But Ieyasu turned it into his greatest asset, developing Edo into a powerful economic and military stronghold, the future capital of Japan, modern-day Tokyo. The real test came in 1598, when Toyotomi Hideyoshi died, leaving behind a 5-year-old son as his heir. Hideyoshi had established a council of 5 elders, composed of the most powerful daimyō, to govern until his son came of age. Ieyasu was the most senior member. But the council was a house of cards. Almost immediately, fractures appeared. The ambitious lords saw a power vacuum, and 2 factions quickly formed. On one side was Ishida Mitsunari, a loyal administrator to the late Hideyoshi, who rallied lords loyal to the Toyotomi family, forming what became known as the Western Army. On the other side was Tokugawa Ieyasu, who used his immense wealth, political influence, and network of alliances to create the Eastern Army. The stage was set for the ultimate showdown, a single battle that would decide the fate of Japan for the next 2.5 centuries. On October 21, 1600, the 2 massive armies met on a misty field in central Japan called Sekigahara. This was more than just a battle. It was the climax of the Sengoku period. The Western Army, loyal to the Toyotomi heir, had a strong defensive position and, on paper, a numerical advantage. The Eastern Army, led by Ieyasu, had to attack. The fighting was fierce, and for hours, The outcome was uncertain. Ieyasu's forces were struggling to break through. But Ieyasu, the master strategist, had an ace up his sleeve. He had spent the night before the battle sending secret messages to several of the Western Army's key commanders, promising them land and titles if they switched sides at a critical moment. As the battle raged, Ieyasu gave the signal. One of the most powerful Western lords, Kobayaka Hideaki, who was positioned on a hill overlooking the battlefield, suddenly turned his forces and charged into the flank of his own allies. This betrayal caused a chain reaction. Other lords who were on the fence saw which way the wind was blowing, and either joined Ieyasu's attack or simply stood down. The Western army collapsed in a panic. The Battle of Sekigahara was over in a single day, a decisive and absolute victory for Tokugawa Ieyasu. With his enemies crushed at Sekigahara, Ieyasu was the undisputed master of Japan. 3 years later, in 1603, the emperor granted him the ancient title he had coveted for so long, Sai Taishogun, or Great General, who subdues the barbarians. This marked the official beginning of the Tokugawa Shogunate, a military government that would rule from Ieyasu's new capital of Edo. But Ieyasu knew that winning a war was one thing, maintaining peace was another challenge entirely. The daimyō, the powerful samurai lords, still commanded their own armies and ruled their own lands. How could he prevent them from rebelling in the future? His solution was a stroke of political genius. He implemented a series of brilliant and oppressive policies designed to keep the daimyō weak and under his thumb. The most effective of these was the sankin kōtai system, or alternate attendance. This policy required every daimyō to spend every other year living in the capital of Edo, away from their home provinces. And when they returned home, they were forced to leave their wives and heirs behind in Edo as permanent hostages. This had two major effects. First, the constant travel to and from Edo, along with the expense of maintaining two lavish residences, one in their home domain and one in the capital, was financially crippling for the daimyō. It drained their resources, making it nearly impossible to afford to raise an army and wage war. Second, with their families effectively held captive by the shogun, the daimyō had a powerful incentive to remain loyal. Any hint of rebellion would mean certain death for their loved ones. This system was the key to maintaining control and ensuring stability. Ieyasu also reorganized society itself. He instituted a rigid 4-class system, with the samurai warriors at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants at the bottom. This social hierarchy was hereditary, and movement between classes was strictly forbidden. This locked society in place, and reinforced the samurai's position as the ruling elite, but an elite now loyal to the shogunate, not their own ambitions. The samurai, once warriors constantly at war, were transformed into a class of bureaucrats and administrators. Finally, to prevent any disruptive foreign ideas or technologies from destabilizing his new order, Ieyasu and his successors implemented the sakoku policy, or chained country. Japan was almost completely isolated from the outside world. Foreign travel was banned, and trade was restricted to a single port with only the Dutch and Chinese. This policy of isolation would define Japan for over 2 centuries, allowing a unique and distinct Japanese culture to flourish internally, free from external influence. Tokugawa Ieyasu died in 1616, having achieved what no one before him ever could, a lasting peace. The period his shogunate ushered in, known as the Edo period, was an unprecedented era of stability and prosperity that lasted for over 250 years. The constant warfare of the Sengoku Jidai became a distant memory. Cities grew, commerce thrived, and a vibrant urban culture emerged, producing everything from kabuki theater to ukiyo-e woodblock prints. Ieyasu's legacy is complex. He was a ruthless warlord who seized power through bloodshed and betrayal. But he was also a visionary statesman who used that power to end a century of suffering and create a foundation for modern Japan. His story is a powerful reminder that history is often shaped, not by the most ferocious warrior, but by the most patient strategist. His journey from hostage to shogun is one of the most remarkable tales in all of history. Thanks for watching our look into the life of Tokugawa Ieyasu. If you enjoy exploring the great figures who shaped our world, please consider subscribing to Historical Figures and Moments and hitting that notification bell. We have a new video every week and would love for you to join our community of history enthusiasts. See you next time.